The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. In the year 2347, they finally got their answer. Park Tae-ho stood at the viewing window of the UES Dawn of Terra, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. He was 53 years old, with gray hair at his temples and calm eyes that had seen both war and peace. Earth had chosen him to be their voice among the stars. It was the greatest honor of his life, and also the heaviest burden. Behind him, Kim Yuna checked her tablet for the 100th time. She was young, only 28, but brilliant. She had memorized every piece of information humanity had gathered about the alien species they were about to meet. Her job was to help Tae-ho say the right things and avoid mistakes that could doom their mission. Near the door stood Choi Sok, the security chief. He was a large man with a shaved head and arms thick with muscle. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before joining the diplomatic corps. He did not trust aliens. He did not trust anyone, really. But he would die to protect the ambassador. That was his duty, and Sok always did his duty. The space station was called the Gathering Point. It was built around a dying red star, and it was older than human civilization. 12 alien species had created it together, 50,000 years ago, to serve as the capital of their galactic council. They had ruled the galaxy ever since, keeping peace among themselves while watching younger species rise and fall. Now humanity had arrived at their door, asking to join. The Dawn of Terra docked smoothly. When the airlock opened, Tae-ho took a deep breath and stepped forward into history. Yuna walked at his right side, Sok at his left. They entered a long hallway made of some kind of white stone that seemed to glow from within. Alien guards lined the walls. They were Veleth, the most powerful species on the council. They stood 7 feet tall, with gray skin, 4 arms, and faces that showed no emotion. Their black eyes followed the humans with cold interest. A Veleth official met them at the end of the hallway. He introduced himself as Morath, High Arbiter of the Veleth Dominion and current leader of the Galactic Council. Tae-ho bowed respectfully. Morath did not bow back. The council chamber was a vast circular room with seats arranged in rising tiers. Representatives from all 12 species sat watching as the humans entered. Tae-ho felt their eyes on him. Some looked curious, most looked bored, a few looked hostile. Morath took his place at the highest seat and gestured for Tae-ho to speak. Tae-ho had practiced this speech 1,000 times. He spoke clearly and simply, knowing his words were being translated into a dozen alien languages. He told them about Earth. He told them about humanity's long journey from caves to cities to stars. He spoke of their wars, yes, but also their art, their music, their love for their children. He spoke of their dream to explore the universe and make friends among the stars. He asked, humbly, for humanity to be given a chance to prove themselves worthy of joining galactic civilization. When he finished, there was silence. Then one of the council members spoke. He was Kiran, a species that looked like insects with glittering wings. His voice buzzed unpleasantly. The Kiran asked why they should accept a species that had spent most of its history killing each other. How could they trust beings so violent and short-lived? Humans only lived for about a century. What could they possibly contribute? Tae-ho answered calmly. He said that yes, humans had fought many wars, but they had also learned from those wars. Each generation tried to be better than the last. Their short lives made them value peace even more, because they knew how precious time was. Another council member spoke, this one from the Oreth Federation. The Oreth were tall and thin, with silver skin and large black eyes. Unlike the others, this one seemed genuinely interested. She asked about human art and science. Tae-ho answered her questions gladly, and for a moment, he felt hope. But then Morath raised his hand for silence. The High Arbiter spoke in a cold, flat voice. He said the council would consider humanity's request. A decision would be made in 3 days. Until then, the humans would be given quarters on the station and treated as honored guests. Tae-ho thanked him and bowed again. This time, Morath gave the smallest nod of his head. As they were led to their quarters, Yuna whispered that she thought it went well. Sok said nothing, but his hand stayed near his weapon. The quarters were comfortable but plain. There were no windows. Seok checked every corner for listening devices and found several. He disabled them all. That night, Taeho could not sleep. He stood in the small common room, thinking about everything that could go wrong. Yuna found him there and brought him tea. She asked if he was worried. He admitted that he was. Something felt wrong, though he could not say what. Yuna reminded him that they had done everything they could. The rest was up to fate. What they did not know was that fate had already decided against them. In a secret chamber deep within the station, the council met without the humans present. Morath stood before them and spoke in harsh tones. He said that humans were dangerous. He had studied their history, and it terrified him. No other species had advanced so quickly. No other species had such a capacity for violence. If humanity was allowed to grow, they would eventually challenge the council itself. The solution, Morath said, was simple. Kill the delegation. Destroy Earth. End the human threat before it could begin. Some council members objected. The Orath representative said this was murder. Plain and simple. Humanity had done nothing wrong. You could not punish someone for crimes they might commit in the future. But Morath was persuasive. He spoke of security, of protecting their children and their civilization. He reminded them of other young species that had grown too powerful and caused great destruction before being stopped. In the end, the vote was 8-4. The motion passed. The humans would die. Earth would burn. And the galaxy would never know that humanity had come in peace. In their quarters, Taeho finally fell asleep, still believing that tomorrow might bring good news. He did not know that he had only 3 days left to live. 3 days passed slowly on the gathering point station. Taeho spent his time meeting with various alien representatives, trying to build friendships and show them the best of humanity. Some were polite, some were cold. None gave any sign of what was coming. On the third evening, a message arrived. The council invited the human delegation to a ceremonial feast. It was a great honor, the message said. A celebration of new friendships between species. Yuna was excited. She thought this meant good news. Sok was suspicious, as always, but he agreed they could not refuse without causing offense. They dressed in their finest clothes. Taeho wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, with medals on his chest that showed his years of service. Yuna wore a simple black dress. Seok wore his combat suit under his formal jacket. The feast was held in a beautiful hall with walls of crystal that showed the red dying star outside. Tables were arranged in a circle, and food from a dozen worlds filled silver plates. The smell was strange but not unpleasant. Morath himself greeted them at the entrance. He smiled, though his eyes remained cold. He said he hoped the humans would enjoy the evening. Tomorrow, he promised, their future would be decided. Taeho thanked him and took his seat at the table of honor. Yuna sat beside him. Sok stood behind them, refusing to sit. He watched every movement in the room. The feast began. Alien music played softly. Council members came to their table to make polite conversation. Taeho ate carefully, choosing only foods that had been tested safe for humans. Yuna took notes on everything, still hoping to find allies. An hour passed. Then 2. Seok grew more and more tense. Something was wrong. The servants kept looking at them. The guards at the doors had changed positions 3 times. Then the lights went out. Seok moved instantly. He grabbed Taeho and Yuna and pulled them under the table. His weapon was in his hand before the first shot was fired. Laser fire lit up the darkness. Screams echoed through the hall. The crystal walls shattered as armored soldiers burst through from all directions. They wore Veleth military uniforms. Sok fired back, his aim perfect even in the chaos. 1 soldier fell, then another, then 3 more. He had trained for moments like this his entire life, but there were too many. Yuna crawled toward a side door, pulling out her communicator. Her hands shook as she typed a desperate message to the Dawn of Terra. Distress signal. Betrayal. Send to Earth. Tell them what happened. She pressed send just as a soldier grabbed her arm and threw her to the ground. Seok killed 5 more before they overwhelmed him. It took 12 soldiers to bring him down, and even then he kept fighting until they shot him in both legs. He fell, still trying to reach his weapon. Taeho did not fight. He stood slowly, his hands raised, and faced his attackers with dignity. Blood from a cut on his forehead ran down his face, but his voice was steady. He asked what this meant. Were they prisoners now? The soldier who answered laughed. He said they were not prisoners, they were dead. They just did not know it yet. They dragged all 3 humans to the council chamber. The great room was full now. Every seat taken. The lights were bright, and recording devices floated in the air, capturing everything. Morath stood at the highest seat, looking down at the humans in chains. He spoke in his cold voice, and his words were broadcast to every corner of the station. He said that the Galactic Council had reached a decision. Humanity was guilty of the crime of potential aggression. Their history showed that they would inevitably become a threat to galactic peace. Therefore, the Council had voted to eliminate this threat before it could grow. The human delegation would be executed immediately. A fleet had already been sent to Earth. Within 1 month, the human species would no longer exist. Tejo listened to these words. He did not beg. He did not cry. He stood straight and met Morath's eyes. He asked what evidence they had. What crime had humanity actually committed? How could you execute someone for something they had not done? Morath answered simply. He said humanity's crime was potential. The Council had seen their history. They knew what humans were capable of becoming. That was enough. Tejo was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his words carried across the chamber with a strength that surprised everyone. He said that the Council had made a terrible mistake. Not because humans were vengeful, though they could be. Not because humans were powerful, though they were stronger than anyone knew, but because humans remembered. They remembered every kindness and every cruelty. They remembered their friends, and they remembered their enemies. He said that if the Council killed him and destroyed Earth, other humans would come someday. Maybe not for 1,000 years, maybe not for 10,000, but they would come, and they would remember. Morath dismissed these words as the desperate threats of a dying man. He gave the order. Tejo, Yuna, and Sok were executed in front of the entire council. It was quick, at least, a flash of light, and they were gone. What the council did not know was that the Dawn of Terra had received Yuna's message. The ship had escaped into faster-than-light travel moments before Velith warships could stop it. Even now, it was racing toward Earth at impossible speed. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Baek Dai-sung sat in his office, reviewing reports from the diplomatic mission. He was an old friend of Tejo. They had served together in the military decades ago. He had been best man at Tejo's wedding. When the message arrived, he played it on his screen. He watched his friend die. He watched Yuna fall. He watched Seok fight like a lion until his last breath. He watched it again. And again. Then he stood up slowly. His face showed no emotion, but his hands were shaking. He walked out of his office and down the long hallway to the United Earth Defense Council chamber. The guards saw his face and stepped aside without a word. He entered the chamber, where Earth's military leaders had already gathered. They had all seen the message. They were all waiting for him to speak. Daesung looked at each of them in turn. Then he spoke 4 words that would change the galaxy forever. Wake the silent fleet. No one asked what he meant. Everyone in that room knew about the secret that Earth had kept for 200 years. The secret they had hoped they would never need to use. The orders went out within the hour. Deep beneath Mars, in the hollowed moons of Jupiter, in hidden stations throughout the asteroid belt, massive doors began to open. The galaxy thought Earth had 12 warships. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 200 years ago, humanity had detected faint signals from deep space. They were clearly artificial. Someone else was out there. Earth's leaders had faced a choice. They could reach out in friendship and hope for the best, or they could prepare for the worst while still hoping for peace. They chose both. On the surface, humanity built a small fleet of 12 diplomatic vessels. They were beautiful ships, designed to show that Earth came in peace. They carried no heavy weapons. They were meant to make friends, but in secret, humanity built something else entirely. The silent fleet was born in darkness and kept in shadow. Over 2 centuries, the greatest minds on Earth designed weapons that had never existed before. Kinetic accelerators that could fire metal slugs at 90% of the speed of light. Antimatter warheads that could crack planets, AI systems that could control billions of combat drones at once, shield technology that could stop almost anything. They built these weapons into ships. Thousands of ships. They hid them in places no one would ever think to look. Hollowed asteroids, artificial moons, deep underground bases on Mars and Europa, and they waited. Year after year, generation after generation, the silent fleet waited in darkness. Crews trained in secret. Weapons were tested in hidden places. Everything was kept ready for a day that might never come. Now that day had come. Admiral Baek Dae-sung stood on the bridge of the UES Wrath of Seoul. It was the flagship of the Silent Fleet, the most powerful warship ever built by human hands. It was 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that the Galactic Council could not even imagine. Around him, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this their entire lives. Every one of them had known this day might come. Every one of them had lost sleep wondering if they would be ready. They were ready. Captain Yoon Nari commanded the carrier group Incheon's Vengeance from her ship, the UES Righteous Storm. She was 41 years old, with short black hair and eyes like steel. Her carrier held 10,000 combat drones, each one capable of destroying a small warship on its own. Commander Han Jin sat in the command center of the UES Silent Thunder, surrounded by holographic displays. He controlled the drone swarms, over 2 billion individual units spread across the fleet. His mind was connected directly to the AI systems that managed them. When he thought, they moved. And there were thousands more. Battleships and cruisers, destroyers and frigates, support vessels and troop transports, 4,200 warships in all, emerging from hiding places across the solar system. The Council's sterilization fleet was already approaching Earth. 200 warships, the largest force the Velith Dominion had ever sent against a single target. Their commander, Admiral Koreth, was confident. He had seen the reports on human technology. He expected no resistance. Earth's first message reached him when his fleet was 3 days from their destination. Turn back or die. Koreth laughed when he read it. He showed the message to his officers, and they laughed too. What could 12 primitive vessels do against 200 warships that had conquered dozens of species? He sent a reply. He told the humans to surrender, and their deaths would be quick. Resist, and they would suffer. Earth did not respond with words. The Silent Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in a perfect formation around the Velith fleet. One moment, Koreth's sensors showed empty space. The next moment, 4,000 warships surrounded him on all sides. For a long moment, there was only silence. Koreth stared at his screens, unable to believe what he was seeing. His officers turned pale. Some began to pray. Dae-sung's voice came over the communication channel. It was calm and cold. He said this was Admiral Koreth's only chance. Order his fleet to surrender. All crews would be treated as prisoners of war under human law. No harm would come to those who laid down their weapons. Koreth should have surrendered. Any reasonable being would have surrendered, but Koreth was not reasonable. He was angry and proud and afraid, and those feelings made him stupid. He screamed the order to attack. His fleet fired everything they had. Missiles and lasers and plasma beams streaked toward the human ships. The human shields held without even flickering. Then the Silent Fleet returned fire. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Kinetic rounds tore through Velith ships like paper. Antimatter warheads turned cruisers into expanding clouds of gas. Drone swarms overwhelmed point defense systems and carved battleships apart piece by piece. Han Jin directed his drones with cold precision. Each unit knew exactly where to strike, exactly when to move. They were extensions of his will, and his will was absolute. Nari launched wave after wave of attack craft. Her pilots were the best humanity had ever produced. They flew through enemy formations like ghosts, destroying everything they touched. Dae-sung watched from the Wrath of Seoul, directing the overall battle. He felt no joy in this slaughter. Only duty. Only the cold satisfaction of justice delivered. When it was over, not a single Velith ship remained. 200 warships, gone in 11 minutes. The Silent Fleet had lost exactly 0 vessels. Dae-sung ordered his people to search for survivors. They found a few thousand. floating in escape pods or clinging to debris. He ordered them brought aboard and treated well. Prisoners deserved dignity, even if their leaders did not. Then he sent a message to every inhabited system in the galaxy. Every planet, every station, every ship with a receiver heard the same words. The message included the footage of Tejo's execution. It showed the Council voting to destroy Earth. It showed the sterilization fleet launching. Then it showed what happened to that fleet. After the footage, President Kang Mina appeared on screen. She was a small woman with gray hair and fierce eyes. She had led Earth through 20 years of peace and growth. Now she would lead them through war. She spoke simply and clearly. She said that Earth had sent an ambassador in peace. The Galactic Council had murdered him. Earth had committed no crime, threatened no one. The Council had voted to kill every human being anyway. This would not stand. She said that humanity was not coming for revenge. They were coming for justice. Every council member who had voted for genocide would answer for their crime. Every military target that had supported this decision would be destroyed. But she made a promise too. Civilians would not be harmed. Cities would not be bombed. Innocents would not suffer for the sins of their leaders. Humanity would show the galaxy what justice looked like. Real justice. Not the kind that killed people for crimes they had not committed. She ended with a warning. Do not stand against us. Do not protect those who tried to murder our children. Stand aside, and you will not be harmed. Stand in our way, and you will fall. The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Billions of beings watched it. Some were terrified. Some were amazed. A few, just a few, began to hope. The silent fleet turned toward the galactic core and began to move. The reckoning had begun. The silent fleet split into 12 battle groups, one for each species of the Galactic Council. They moved through the galaxy like a storm, unstoppable and precise. Admiral Baek Dae-sung led the largest group toward Velith Prime, the heart of the Velith Dominion. The Velith had been the strongest voice calling for humanity's destruction. They would be the first to face judgment. The Velith had 3 days to prepare. They used every moment. Defense platforms were activated around their homeworld. Every warship in their fleet was called back to defend the capital. Ground forces dug in, expecting an invasion. They were wrong about what was coming. Dae-sung did not come to conquer. He came to remove the Velith's ability to wage war. Nothing more, nothing less. The battle for Velith Prime's orbital space lasted 6 hours. The human fleet systematically destroyed every military installation, every shipyard, every weapons platform. They were careful, almost surgical in their attacks. When a civilian transport accidentally entered the battle zone, Dae-sung ordered his ships to hold fire until it was clear. The Velith defense fleet fought hard. They were brave, Dae-sung admitted to himself. Brave but outmatched. Their technology was good, but humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for this. Every Velith weapon had been studied. Every tactic had been planned for. When the last Velith warship fell, Dae-sung sent Marines to the surface. But not to conquer. They went to destroy military bases, weapons factories, and command centers. They did not touch homes or hospitals or schools. The Velith civilians watched in confusion as human soldiers marched past them without firing a shot. Some humans even stopped to help injured people. Regardless of species, one Velith child, separated from her family during the chaos, was found crying in the ruins of a military checkpoint. A human Marine named Sergeant Park Jun picked her up, wrapped her in a blanket, and carried her until they found her parents. He did not speak their language, but his kindness needed no translation. Meanwhile, Captain Yoon Nari led her battle group to the Kiraan Collective's territory. The Kiraan were slavers who had kept 3 other species in chains for thousands of years. They had voted enthusiastically for humanity's destruction. Nari hit their slave processing facilities first. Her troops stormed the massive stations where billions of beings were sorted, sold, and shipped across the galaxy. The fighting was fierce but short. When the slaves saw humans breaking down the doors, they did not know what to think. They had never seen anyone defeat the Kiraan. They had never imagined freedom. Nari walked through the holding cells herself, cutting chains with her own hands. She looked into the eyes of beings who had been property their entire lives and told them the same thing, over and over. You are free. No one will ever own you again. The word spread fast. 3 enslaved species rose up against the Kiran on 100 different worlds. The collective's empire collapsed in weeks. Nari did not have to fire many shots. The slaves did most of the work themselves. Once they knew someone had their back, Commander Han Jin brought his drone swarms to the Orath Federation. The Orath had not voted for genocide. They had opposed it, in fact, but their military had agreed to support the Veleth anyway. Hoping to stay on the winning side, Jin gave them one chance to stand down. Their admiral refused. The Orath had called their fleet the Invincible Armada. It was the largest single military force in the galaxy. Over 2,000 warships gathered in one place. They believed no enemy could defeat them. Jin's drones proved them wrong. The swarms moved like living things, billions of small units acting as one. They slipped through gaps in the Orath formation. They overwhelmed point defense systems. They attached to ships and cut them apart from the inside. The battle lasted 4 hours. The Invincible Armada was destroyed completely. Jin did not lose a single human pilot, because none of his weapons had pilots. Only drones, guided by his thoughts. After the battle, Jin broadcast a message to the Orath homeworld. He told them that their leaders had made a terrible choice. But the Orath people were not their leaders. They would not be punished for someone else's crime. He offered peace. The Orath accepted. Across the galaxy, the story repeated itself. Human fleets destroyed military targets with terrifying efficiency. Shipyards burned. Defense stations crumbled. Command centers fell, but civilians were protected. Supplies were delivered to areas damaged by fighting. Medical teams treated anyone who needed help, regardless of species. The Council had expected monsters. They found something else entirely. On the gathering point station, panic spread through the halls. News arrived every hour of another defeat. The Kiran Collective had surrendered. The Orath Federation had signed peace terms. 3 more species had withdrawn from the Council entirely, hoping humanity would spare them. High Arbiter Morath refused to give up. He called the remaining Council members together and demanded they fight to the last. He said humanity must be destroyed at any cost. If they could not win through strength, they would win through other means. He ordered the deployment of Project Silence, a bioweapon designed specifically to target human DNA. It had been created in secret, just in case. One small container, released on Earth, would kill every human being within a year. The order was sent to a hidden laboratory on a moon far from any battle zone. Scientists there began preparing the weapon for transport, but humanity had spies everywhere now. Intelligence Officer Lee Ara intercepted the order. Ara was 35 years old, born on a colony ship, raised among the stars. She had spent 10 years building a network of informants across the galaxy. When she saw the message about Project Silence, she knew what she had to do. The bioweapon could not be allowed to exist. Every moment it survived was a threat to her people. She took a fast scout ship and flew alone toward the laboratory. Her commanders ordered her to wait for backup. She ignored them. There was no time. The laboratory was protected by heavy defenses. A fleet would have taken hours to break through. Ara did not have hours. She sent one final message to Admiral Daesung. She told him where the laboratory was and what it contained. She told him she was sorry she could not say goodbye properly. Then she pushed her ship to maximum speed and aimed directly at the heart of the facility. The defenses fired everything they had. Her shields failed. Her hull began to tear apart, but her ship was moving too fast to stop. She hit the laboratory at nearly the speed of light. The impact was beyond massive. The entire moon cracked from the force. The laboratory, the bioweapon, and everything within 100 kilometers was vaporized instantly. Liara died without feeling any pain. Her last thought was of her family on Earth, safe because of what she had done. Her final transmission was broadcast to the entire fleet. For Teho, for Yuna, for Siok, for Earth, the silent fleet paused in their advance. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot observed a moment of silence for the woman who had saved them all. Then they resumed their march toward the gathering point. Morath had tried to commit one genocide and been stopped. He had tried to commit another, and been stopped again. Now there was nowhere left to hide. The time for judgment had come. The Wrath of Sol emerged from faster-than-light travel directly in front of the Gathering Point station. The massive human warship hung in space like a dark promise, its weapons silent but ready. Admiral Baek Dae-sung stood on the bridge, watching the ancient station on his screens. This was where his friend had died. This was where the order to murder 8 billion people had been given. His hands wanted to shake. He did not let them. Around the station, the last remnants of the Council's defense force waited. 50 ships, all that remained of a fleet that had once numbered in the thousands. They had gathered here for a final stand, knowing they could not win but unwilling to surrender. Dae-sung opened a communication channel. His voice was calm when he spoke. He told them to stand down. The war was over. Humanity had not come to destroy the station or kill everyone inside. They had come for justice, and justice did not require more death. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, one by one, the defending ships powered down their weapons. Some fled into faster-than-light travel, running to wherever they thought they could hide. Most simply waited, accepting whatever fate would bring. The Wrath of Sol did not fire a single shot. Dae-sung took a shuttle to the station himself. He brought only a single squad of Marines, led by Sergeant Oh Hyun. The sergeant was young, only 26. But he had fought in every major battle of the campaign. His eyes were old for his face. They docked at the same port where the Dawn of Terra had arrived months ago. The same hallway of white glowing stones stretched before them. But this time, there were no guards. The Velith soldiers had fled or surrendered. Dae-sung walked slowly, his boots echoing in the silence. He thought about Taeho walking this same path, full of hope and good intentions. He thought about Yuna and Seok, who had died trying to protect their ambassador. He would honor them, not with more killing, but with something harder, something better. The council chamber was exactly as it had been during the execution. The seats still rose in tiers toward the ceiling. The recording devices still floated in the air. But now, the seats held only a handful of beings, the last members of the Galactic Council who had not fled. High Arbiter Morath sat in his high seat, alone at the top. His forearms were folded across his chest. His black eyes showed no fear. Dae-sung stopped in the center of the chamber, exactly where Taeho had stood in chains. He looked up at the beings who had sentenced his species to death. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He spoke quietly, and his words carried to every corner of the room. He said that the Galactic Council was dissolved, its authority was ended, its laws were void. He said that the beings in this room would stand trial for the murder of Ambassador Park Taeho, Aide Kim Yuna, and Security Chief Choi Sok. They would answer for ordering the genocide of 8 billion people on Earth. He said that the trial would be fair, evidence would be heard, defense would be allowed. If any of them were found innocent, they would go free. If they were found guilty, they would face whatever punishment the court decided. This was not revenge. This was law. Morath laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. He asked who gave humanity the right to judge them. They were newcomers, primitives, animals who had barely learned to walk among the stars. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. By what authority could humans put them on trial? Dae-sung was quiet for a moment. Then, he pulled up a holographic display. He showed footage, but not of battle, not of destruction. He showed human doctors treating wounded aliens on Velith Prime. He showed Marines sharing food with refugees on Kiran stations. He showed engineers rebuilding infrastructure that human weapons had damaged, working alongside the very people they had fought against. He showed the child that Sergeant Park Jun had carried to safety. He showed the slaves that Captain Nari had freed. He showed 1,000 small acts of kindness performed by human soldiers in the middle of a war. He said that humanity was capable of terrible things. Their history proved it. They had killed each other for thousands of years before they ever reached the stars, but they were also capable of choosing to be better. Every day, every hour, they made that choice. It was hard. Sometimes they failed. But they kept trying. He said the Council had judged humanity by their worst moments and tried to kill them for crimes they had not committed. They had looked at human history and seen only the darkness. They had missed the light. Dae-sung turned to leave. Then he paused and looked back at Morath. He said that humans remembered. They remembered their friends, and they remembered their enemies. But they also remembered how to forgive. Eventually, today was not that day. Today was for justice. Maybe someday, it would be different. Morath's face twisted with rage. He screamed that humanity could not do this. They were nothing. They were insects. They would pay for this insult. Sergeant Oh-hyun stepped forward, his hand resting on his weapon. He spoke quietly, his voice steady. He said that animals did not build courts. Animals did not offer trials. Animals did not show mercy to those who had tried to murder them. He told Morath to be grateful that humans were not what the council had thought they were. The Marines escorted the council members to holding cells. They were treated with dignity, given food and water and medical care. None were harmed. The trials took 3 months. Evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. Defense arguments were heard. In the end, Morath and 4 others were found guilty of crimes against sentience. They were sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote station, where they would live out their days in comfort but never again hold power. The others were released. Some had voted against genocide. Some had been pressured into compliance. The court decided they had suffered enough. 5 years passed. The United Galactic Assembly met for the first time in a new station built specifically for this purpose. Representatives from 47 species filled the seats. More than had ever gathered in one place before. President Kang Mina delivered the opening address. She was older now, her hair completely white, but her voice was still strong. She said that the galaxy had changed. The old order, built on fear and dominance, was gone. A new order was being born, built on cooperation and mutual respect. She said that humanity was honored to be part of this new beginning. They would contribute what they could and learn what they must. They would make mistakes, and they would try to fix them. They would not always be right, but they would always try to be fair. She hoped that someday, the pain of the past could be forgotten. Not the lessons, never the lessons, but the anger, the hate, the fear. Someday, Ambassador Baek Dae-sung sat in the human delegation's seat. He had resigned his military commission after the war. He had seen enough fighting for one lifetime. Beside him sat a young woman with dark hair and serious eyes. Park Soo, daughter of Tae-ho, was 23 years old. She had been training for this moment since her father's death. She wore his diplomatic pin on her collar, polished until it shone. She did not remember her father well. She had been too young when he left for the stars. But she remembered his laugh. She remembered the way he would read her stories before bed. She remembered what he believed in: peace, understanding, the hope that different peoples could find common ground. She would spend her life trying to make his dream real. In the center of the assembly hall stood a statue of 3 figures: Park Tae-ho in his diplomatic uniform, standing tall; Kim Yuna beside him, her tablet in her hands; Choi Sok behind them both, watchful and protective even in stone. The inscription at the base read simply, "They came in peace. They were answered with death. And still, their people chose justice over vengeance." The galaxy had feared humanity. They had expected monsters, destroyers, conquerors. They had found something else. Something unexpected. Humans were dangerous, yes. Humans were emotional. Humans remembered every wrong done to them. But humans also built. They healed. They taught. They forgave. Not quickly, not easily. But eventually, the assembly session began with a moment of silence for all those who had died. Human and alien alike. Victim and soldier. The lost and the fallen. Then the work of building a better galaxy began. It would not be easy. It would not be fast. There would be setbacks, and failures, and moments of doubt. But humanity had come too far to give up now. The stars had called to them. They had answered, and they were just getting started.